of the continent. Now you will find also that part of the problem has been that we don't have the technical expertise to be able to go through the process of delimiting our maritime boundaries. And we have very often fallen on external support from foreign other nations to help us in terms of the expertise. And what you come to realize is that it's a very complicated activity in delimiting the maritime boundary. And you need a lot of experts, oceanographers, hydrographers, persons who are very qualified in the law of the sea and delimitation. And this comes with cost. And the reports show that when Ghana did Ghana Court of Law, the legal fees alone was about 2.8 million US dollars. That's a significant amount of money which just went into that. But the truth is that it is worth it, because you find that the certainty it brings helps with the investment that will follow it. And finally, just to wrap up on this point about the causes of African states not delimiting their frontiers, has to do with the issue of cultural ties with our neighboring coastal states. If you look at Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, for example, there's so much in commonality in terms of our culture with Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And often we fall into this sense of tacit agreement that we've agreed on what the boundary is. But unfortunately, when it's tested, the courts at the international level have decided that no, these boundaries must be clearly delimited. And these collegial activities, cordial relations by themselves do not amount to a settlement of the boundaries. And Oliver asked the question about whether we should go with joint development or we should go through the process of formal delimitation by way of dispute. I would say it depends on the structure or the mode of settlement. And at the international level, that the law requires that settlement of maritime boundaries should be by way of agreements. It is only when agreement fails that you proceed to third-party dispute settlement. And normally, if you are going to have joint developments as a result of the straddling nature of petroleum or fishery resources, then at the first level of agreement, if you are able to achieve it, it is most likely that you can have a joint development or joint management because of the transnational nature of ocean governance issues. But normally, when the case travels to the very end and it involves third parties in settling it, well, it becomes like winner takes all. And at that level, you can't have joint development, but you can have cooperation between the states, but you will not be able to have one particular natural resource being managed by two or more nations. So it will depend at what stage of the proceedings a settlement is reached. And that goes a long way in determining or influencing the ocean governance policies in that direction.
Thank you very much for that. You mentioned sort of the role of oceanographers and other non-legal persons in the process. As somebody myself who is always very ashamed to introduce myself, in any context as a lawyer, I understand particularly the limits of law when it comes to the ocean. And I'm coming to you, Professor, because I want us to be able to tease out the connection between law and science. As the oceans is concerned, I think the oceans, we can agree, is one of the least understood. Even though it remains central to our lives, we have very little understanding of the ocean from the scientific perspective. In fact, sometimes the legal frustrates how we understand the ocean as a scientific phenomenon. So I'll be interested to see the ways in which science can contribute to policy making and also enhancing our appreciation of how to better govern the ocean.
Basically, will it work this time? Yes, good. Yeah, really, the good thing about the oceans is that it's very huge and broad and all that. Its study is basically interdisciplinary. So you need all manner of expertise, biologists, scientists, sociologists, lawyers, everyone, because the ocean, every issue is in there. And because of that, it presents challenges to us to move science into policy here and there. I think one thing that will help move us forward is to have the connect between science and policy is for policymakers and scientists to collaborate in the knowledge gathering. in the knowledge gathering. Often, when there's suspicion, when scientists go out there, go collect the information and bring it to the policymakers. So there's a need for collaboration, involve the sociologists, involve the economists, and not only the oceanographers or the hydrographers. So involve all the other parts, and as we bring them on board right from the start, we'll be able to form common platform, common database, common everything, and then we'll be able to move the science into policy. So at the end of it, it's not only about publishing in journal articles here and there, but it's about coming up with policy briefs, things that will lead to development, and things that will attack social ills, and so that we can have more social impact. Finally, we need to educate the populace and bring all others around on board so that we can understand each other and we'll move Africa forward. Thank you. Okay.
One of the things you have hinted about is, for instance, bringing policymakers into the data collection process. But there's also questions you would agree around, challenges around even data sharing across border institutions generally. And within an ecosystem where we have so many different institutions that touch on the ocean in so many different aspects, how do we better deal with this problem of data sharing across the industrial ecosystem?
Yes, I still get back to the issue of forging everything together from the start, and also to build capacity at all levels. We find that we are short of a lot of information about the oceans because in Africa, human capacity about the ocean is low. And even in Ghana or in parts of Africa, even if you swimming, it's a challenge. Quite a number of people cannot swim and are afraid of the ocean. They talk about the ocean being boiling water and all that. You know, people, we need divers. We also need technology. The technology is also not available too much. So they need to use remote sensing in our data collection, to use unmanned vehicles and all that. And all those sort of things have got cost associated with them. To build this database, we need technology, we need expertise, and we actually also even need a research vessel. And you come around the sub-region, and of the 16 West African countries, only one or two will have a research vessel. Ghana has been without a research vessel since 1972. So building this database requires quite a lot of logistics, funding costs, and all. So that's why most of these things about the ocean and building the database has been through external support. We've had the Atlantide expedition, we've had the Fridge of Nansen surveys that come every 2 years. Last year, Fridge of Nansen didn't come to Ghana because Ghana probably could not even harness the money to be able to pay for certain things. So building that database is not easy, and we have all these constraints facing us.
Thank you. I appreciate your frankness on the point. One of the things you hinted on, and perhaps I bring for Kwesi in here, is how we bring each other together in having this conversation. And I suppose this is one of the reasons why we are intent on making this project and Venture Center a convening hub for conversations like this. Now, you have been working with the UN Mission on Love of the Sea towards, and it's actually, again, NORAD-funded project, towards developing an ocean governance framework for Ghana. I'd be interested to hear your experiences in trying to do this in the country and what you hope to achieve in the process.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think a question with regards to scientists working with other relevant stakeholders within the oceanic domain is key. And now we're moving more towards the area of multidisciplinary approach in looking at problems and issues that are connected to the ocean. You can't, you do the science, and the results of the science are very important, but they must feed into something, so that you don't just publish the results of the science, but then the results of the science becomes an ingredient or something that will end up feeding into policy. Now, supposing we want to have a coastal erosion management for Ghana, the scientists will definitely do the scientific work to come up with the rate of erosion, which will feed into policy. But the policymaker needs to understand what is going on practically, and then be able to appreciate why we should, formulate such a policy to manage, such a problem. What we are lacking is trust and then respect for each other. I'm saying this because the scientist must appreciate what the non-scientist or probably the legal person is doing and build that trust. And the legal person must also appreciate what the scientist is doing and build that trust. When that trust is there, I believe that we can be able to share data. And that is where we can be able to move forward as a unit. Multidisciplinary approach in some of these things, to me, is key. But the research we are doing, which is the project we are doing, which is being funded by Norway, with Dwalos, we are looking at high-level institutional, national, and then institutional frameworks, legal frameworks that are currently in operation in Ghana. And then we are also mapping the relevant stakeholders, identifying the frameworks that are governing and guiding their activities. And then we are also identifying capacity needs. What are the critical capacity needs, which will help us to, really work on manage the marine environment appropriately. And then also identify priority areas that are critical moving forward. And from the study, we use various approaches. Desktop study, we also came up with a questionnaire which we distributed among the identified key stakeholders. We also had some workshops where we introduced the project to them and then did a validation workshop of the results that we obtained. And then with regards to the priority areas, we identified that maritime security, marine fisheries are the key priority areas that moving forward as a country we should be looking at. And some of the interesting, findings or interesting results that we identified from the stakeholder discussions we had, GFO was the area of capacity development. We are lacking in capacity. We identified that it was something that came out strongly. And we realized that we may have people working within the maritime environment, but the critical capacity is not there. So there's the need to train and develop capacity in these areas. We also identified that, the people are yearning more for the issue of understanding the existing frameworks and how they can use these frameworks to guide their activities. So it comes back to capacity development. So training, capacity development are key. We also identify some level of overlap with regards to activity. There are some level of overlaps. But one interesting thing we also identified was the harmony that exists between the various institutions that are working within the maritime domain and the stakeholders. There is that harmonization, to me, is key. And it's good because we can build on this moving forward to ensure that we have a sustainable use of our resources within the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. There are a number of insights that I'll come back to. But I want to bring Dr. Payson into the conversation as well. I think one of the key conversations that we know that even as institutions like ours, and other institutions and stakeholders are becoming part of the conversation, state institutions like yours definitely have provided a way to lead the conversation and also facilitate the process. Now, you have direct experiences from the Fisheries Commission in terms of the importance of fish to Ghana itself generally, but also the challenges that fishing communities face, and also some of the challenges that exist that you are leading to regarding bottom trawlers that are hunting our waters and other things. I would be interested in picking your thoughts about, what are some of the challenges you think that exist on your level, but also what are the avenues for collaboration that can exist for us to participate in.
Thank you very much. Before I proceed to answer your question, I would like to say that we all are aware the fact that fisheries is very important when it comes to livelihood, food security, income, and then contribution to GDP. So Fisheries Commission is mandated to ensure that the fisheries are sustainably exploited and utilized to maintain the contributions that I mentioned. And Fisheries Commission is doing that through its technical divisions and the units and the regional directorates. And then coming back to your question, when it comes to ocean governance, for me, I see three elements in there. I see legal framework, I see institutional framework, and I see implementation mechanism. So when it comes to legal framework, Fisheries Commission, I must say, is on top. Now we are reviewing most of our legal documents. The Fisheries Act is being reviewed. The management plan has been reviewed and is awaiting cabinet approval and gazetting. Our national fisheries and aquaculture policy has been reviewed and also awaiting to go through cabinet approval and gazetting. We also have developed our co-management policy, which is ready for implementation. And also we have our aquatic animal health policy also developed. And finally, we've been able to develop national action plans to combat IUU, which is also ready for implementation. Then when it comes to legal framework, institutional framework, Fisheries Commission is well established and is visible in all the 16 regions, and the directorates in the regions are being manned by the regional directors. Then when it comes to mechanisms for implementation, we collaborate with a lot of all the ocean-related institutions. We collaborate with all of them, and then our technical divisions are also in to help. And we are reviewing all these legal documents so that we are able to incorporate emerging issues like climate change and IUU. Now, when it comes to challenges, as Commission, I can talk about inadequate research because we don't have research vessel. And since 1996, we've not been able to acquire research vessel, and we've been trying to depend on figure of financing that comes, like my board chair said, every 2 years, and then we are able to go out there to conduct research. And then we have problem with human capacity. As I'm talking now, the whole of Ghana, we are just 270. The whole of Fisheries Commission, that is the South strength. And we are supposed to get about 3,000, but we have just 270. And currently there's a recruitment process going on, but it's woefully inadequate as a forestry Fisheries Commission. So we are just trying to do our best. And then I can also talk about logistics and funds as our main challenges when it comes to trying to implement some of these activities. And then when it comes to avenues for collaboration, like I said, we collaborate with all the ocean-related institutions, engage our stakeholders, we sensitize them, we educate them on routine basis. And so we also try to participate in making international, national, and regional to make sure collaboration is strengthened so that we are able to manage our resources sustainably. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I think you're on the hot seat now. I think one of the things I've come to appreciate about what we have been doing consistently for some time now is this intention to prioritize the ocean. In 2017, let's have the Ocean White Paper. I think you identified 3 key areas: sustainable use, value creation, healthy oceans, and the blue economy as a priority. They've gone on now, you have the Ocean for Development Program, the Fish for Development Program. And in fact, actually, I was in New York, I was at the UN at the time when Norway won its seat on the Security Council. And I know that oceans was a very big part of your pitch and getting there. Through this, you guys continue to work with various developing countries, and now as we see Ghana now. I want you to share your thoughts, first of all, about why the priority for the oceans now at the time. It might be itself an easy answerable question, but policies change for different governments at different times, and I kind of wonder sort of the institutional commitment to the ocean that exists in Norway. But also, it would be interesting for everybody here in the audience to know what are some of the experiences you have gained from working with different development partners and developing countries across the board, and what is reinforcing NORAD commitment to projects such as this?
Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Let me talk about that. Maybe I'll take a starting point, which is the Norwegian experience in a way, the Norwegian story of this, because what we have done gradually through the years is, of course, establish management systems that are quite well working. And when I talk about this, I used to, I mean, it's blurred, but I divide them into three parts. The first is, of course, implementing the law of the seas and maritime delimitation, which is extremely important and which we, I mean, almost entirely now have done in Norway. The second part is, of course, research-based knowledge about the resources, the fisheries resources, seafood, energy, all that, which you need to manage. And the last part is the management systems themselves. I mean, which is probably the most important part, because you can have all the laws in the world and all the knowledge, but in fact these things have to inform policy, right, and be implemented. And for almost 2 decades now, we've had integrated management plans in Norway, where we try to manage different sectors holistically, seen together. It's not easy. I mean, it's not a solution to all conflicts, but we believe it's a better way of managing. And here's where the university, of course, come into play. To do this, you need competence. You need lots of competent people and capacity. For the first part, lawyers, I mentioned, you used the term non-judicial or non-lawyers. I'm a non-lawyer myself, but for that part, lawyers are extremely important. Then the non-lawyers come into the picture, the other parts, biological knowledge of all kinds, and of course, social sciences and so on. And that's why capacity building is a necessary part of it. It's almost like a value chain. So in our global development efforts, we are not copying this model, but we are using this competence with our partners and sharing it, basically. And we are doing that with partners like Ghana bilaterally. That could be corporations like the one we've entered into now, right, between the University of Tromsø, which has one of the best judicial departments in Norway, and you. But it could be also in many other sciences, and also on the government side, so that we can take competence from maritime research and other part, or just even from the civil service. How are we actually doing the plans? And just very briefly to why we're doing it, and let me, maybe it's obvious, but let me also say that maybe there are two a bit different reasons. And one reason is, of course, it's part of our global development effort, right? Many of our development partners rely on the oceans, like Norway. So our countries, in a way, we're nothing without oceans. Many countries are in that situation. It's extremely important and a huge resource potential if they are sustainably managed. But there's also a more global dimension, right? Because implementing the law of the seas is in a way a global good. So, I mean, the oceans are global. There is only one ocean. And when it comes to marine litter or to implementing regulations or to resources, many of them go beyond national borders. So implementing good management systems around the world and implementing the law of the seas properly is a global public good, and it's also in our interest. So it's based both on development perspectives, but also a broader view on foreign policy, I would say.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I do know that Norway, for instance, is one of the has always been central to the oceans in many ways. For a lot of people who study law of the sea, one of some of the earliest cases about fisheries jurisdiction and all of these things have always involved Norway, and I know that this is an area in which you guys have a lot of interest. One of the things I want to do, especially because of our time constraints, is to go around the table and take final words from each of our panelists, starting from you. And what are some of the last thoughts you want to leave the panel to leave with? This is your pitch.
Yeah, thank you very much. Capacity development is key, and then financing. I think government should put in some money in training, or developing this capacity. It's very important. So financing capacity development is what I want to put across. Thank you.
Yes, and when we have these two, then the nations should be able to take up their responsibilities, national responsibilities assigned to them by UNCLOS and all the international conventions that many of us in Africa and other countries have signed up. Thank you.
I would like to say that as we're trying to go into ocean management, we should have at the back of our mind posterity, so that we are able not to compromise the integrity, the health, and the beauty of the ocean. Otherwise, posterity will have to question us.
Well, first, I'm unable to echo you on capacity development, but then it's important to remember that it takes time. And it involves things that often politicians and leaders think are boring, like knowledge management and research and long-term building of systems and all that. So it takes a lot of time. But we can improve. Norway had unresolved conflicts with neighboring Russia. Just a few decades ago, we had we had overfishery of many of our most important resources. Gradually, we've been able to improve. It takes time, but building capacity on every level in government and in the knowledge sector is extremely important. I agree.
I think I also associate myself with all that has been said around this table in saying that the key thing to look at is capacity building. We can't do without it. At this point in time in our development, that is what we are lacking. And whatever step we can take to improve upon it, I would urge that we do so. But just to also add that we need to encourage the collaboration between the sciences and the policy making, the relationship between the law and science. Because we will do the policy, but we need the evidence to base the law on so that it doesn't fail. And we don't have the evidence, the scientists have the evidence. And so we should find a very good way of collaborating so that we get the best result.
Thank you. So I think my final words would be on just two main things. So first is that, we've seen transformations in our country. The notion that we have a national security strategy or we have a maritime strategy is suggestive of other things. It is not enough to have those strategies. We need to have implementation plans. And I believe that this is where epistemic communities, like the universities, research centers, and those who lead advocacy can plug in. It is not enough to have the strategies. We are at a stage where we need to look at implementation. So do submit plans to the requisite entities, the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of the Fisheries Ministry, and the Ministry of Agriculture. And I think it will be useful. They've already mentioned the issue of capacity building, which is very seminal, and I'm not going to talk about that one. But I'd like to leave you with just one, MDA, which is Maritime Domain Awareness. There's a lot of ignorance, in fact, monumental amounts of ignorance in this particular sector. So those of us that are here as lawyers have a lot to learn because UNCLOS is changing and we're seeing so many things change also. We need also convergence. If you look at the area of cyber security, there's a lot of convergence that is going on. And that is what is transforming the world. In coming to maritime, the same amount of convergence is also necessary. And I'm happy that Prof made mention of the multidisciplinary approach. If you come to SGI, we're doing the same thing there. We are embedding a lot of multiplexing, multi-agency in our work. And so I encourage all of you, particularly the universities, to plug into implementation issues. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I remember 2013 when I was telling you the last time that when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the legal department as associate director, I was the only person who had any international law graduate degree or any training at all in law of the sea. And it's interesting to see that how many years on now, we have a program at the University of Ghana which is going to be training a Master of Arts in Ocean Governance, a Master of Law in Ocean Governance. And I'm excited about these opportunities and the ways in which you can continue to grow expertise in countries like ours and hope to make this a regional hub for persons within the sub-region to get much more training and capacity development in this. when I often visit my relatives in Norway, I always have one question when I get there: "Hva vil du spise?" Which is, what are we going to eat? So I am interested in where the food is going to be, and I'm going to invite everybody for the Norwegian delegation who has joined us, the faculty of the University of Ghana School of Law, and members of the University of Ghana and Fisheries Department, and our panelists. Lunch would be on the first floor for students and other participants. Refreshments are being served in the lobby. Thank you very much for joining this conversation. I appreciate your interest in the conversation and being here. Also appreciate the pain of sitting through people talking at you. It's not easy in this world. So very much thank you again, and I appreciate you coming. Thank you again. Questions from the panelists, from the audience that I have just been reminded of. Since I have been reminded of it, I don't know whether anybody has a burning question that they wanted to ask. But I think it's only fair that we get one question in. If not, lunch is still on my mind. That's an encouragement for lunch. They can always get back to us, just said. And then we are happy as well to receive any ways of interest about what the program is about, and any kind of information you want to seek. We appreciate you reaching us on that. Thank you.